Hey guys, so um, as promised, I'm going to talk about Mason. A lot of people don't know what she's been through. So Mason was hospitalized for a total of 25 days. The reason for her being hospitalized was failure to thrive. I don't know if you know what that means or anything, but basically, she was eating, but she wasn't able to gain any weight. She wasn't getting any bigger. She stayed 8 pounds for the longest time, honestly. It was over a month or 2 months that she was only 8 pounds. So, and she was born at 6 pounds, 11 ounces. So that was rough. So I'm just going to kind of go into detail here about everything that happened, everything that led up to it, where we're at now, and kind of just give you guys a better idea. Mason was born in July. She was born 2 weeks early. I was 38 weeks pregnant to the day with Mason when she was born. And there were no complications. I was induced for low fluid. But other than that, she was healthy. Nothing was wrong. Everything was great. You know, she had a couple doctor's appointments. And then once we had her 2-month checkup, that's where they get their first shots. So I was bringing her into the doctor, you know, we were going to get her shots. Everything was going to be great, whatever. Let me preface this by telling you, Mason has always, from day one, literally probably 20 minutes after she was born, she has always been a spitter. She spits up no matter what she eats, no matter how much she eats, she spits it up. She spits up so much. I had mentioned that to her doctor multiple times. I said, you know, she really kind of spits up a lot. Multiple times. And he said, oh, that's normal. Babies spit up. That's normal. That's normal. Okay. So in my head, I'm thinking, he's the doctor. He knows, you know, babies, whatever. So I trusted him. But still, my gut told me every time that we saw him, I said, you know, she really spits up a lot. And he's like, well, that's normal. Babies spit up. So I let it go. So come time for her 2-month checkup, we get there and the medical assistant weighs her. And she was about, I want to say she was 8 pounds, 9 ounces. And he looked at her growth chart and he looked at me and he goes, are you breastfeeding? And I said, yeah. And he said, how do you feel like that's going? And I just looked at him and I said, well, I feel like it's going great. I mean, she eats all the time. She gets enough. I know that I'm making enough. What's the problem? And he said, well, I'm not happy with her growth. And right then I knew deep down in my soul, in my mom heart, I knew. I said, well, she spits up a lot. And he said, well, I'm not happy with this. And I said, okay. And I then mentioned to him that we would not be returning because we were moving. I said, you know, we're moving to South Carolina in 3 days. We will not be back. You can't. And without saying it, this man literally He looked at me, and without actually saying the words, it just clicked in his head. Oh, you're moving away. Not my problem anymore. I am not kidding. That is how he made me feel. That he just was going to dismiss my child and just be done with it. And I had already been fed up with him because I would bring her in for appointments and I would tell him my concerns, and he would really just chalk it up to, well, she's a baby. Those are normal baby things. And just like dismiss every single thing that I ever had to say. And like that just never really sat well with me. So if we would have stayed back home, I would have found a different doctor for her regardless, because I just really wasn't happy with him. So I got on Facebook and I went to a mom's group down here and I asked for advice. I said, we're coming to the area. I need a pediatrician for my daughter. I need this ASAP. It needs to be the best. So I got one recommendation. I got two recommendations, but one of them, I don't know, just sounded better than the other one. And so I called his office and I explained the situation. I said, I need to get my daughter in immediately. He was able to squeeze her in. He got her in on Tuesday. So this was Friday that I called, and she was like, he'll see her on Tuesday. And it was just such a relief that, like, I was very hopeful to see a new doctor and to get, you know, a new perspective on things. So come Tuesday, we moved down here, you know, that weekend. So we got down here on Sunday, and so we were in our new house on Monday, and then on Tuesday we took Mason to the doctor, and Tyler went with me because he was home. He was off work because we had just moved, and so we took her to the doctor. And he looked at her, he listened to everything that I had to say. And he looked at me and he said, this sounds like pyloric stenosis. And I had never heard of that. And he was very, very nice. He drew a picture of like a baby's stomach and, you know, the map to basically the digestive system. And he was like, babies with pyloric stenosis, basically what happens is, and I don't want to say this wrong, but from my understanding, basically it's when like the esophagus, I don't think that's the right word, but something gets blocked along the way to the digestive tract and it builds up. And so then they can't process anything out. It all comes back up. So when he explained this to me, it made a lot of sense that that would be what it is. He said, if this is what it is, and I'm not saying that this is what it is, but if it is, she will have to have surgery. And Tyler and I just looked at each other and, I mean, we panicked immediately. He said, if that's not what it is, I would like her to be hospitalized so we can find out what is going on. And we panicked. So we get back in our car. We drive to the hospital. He said, because he sent us over there first for an ultrasound to see if it was the pyloric stenosis. So we go in the room, we get the ultrasound, and the ultrasound tech looks at me and she said, that's not what it is. And I said, okay. So she's like, I will call her doctor and let him know and see what he wants you to do from there. So Tyler and I kind of immediately knew that she would be staying at the hospital. We didn't know how long. We didn't know what that meant. We didn't know what to expect. We knew that she was going to be staying. So we went back out to the car. We hung out at the hospital for a while. We didn't have any bags packed or anything, obviously. So about an hour later, they called us and they said, we have a room for her, bring her up to the whatever floor. We'll see you there. So we get up there, and the nurses, I cannot say enough great things about the nurses at this hospital. They were incredible. So I can't complain about that, and you will never hear me complaining about the nurses. So day one, we get to her room, and they say, and mind you, I'm still breastfeeding at this point, and they say, okay, we need you to be feeding her express milk. So you have to pump, and you have to give her whatever you pump. Okay, cool. So I was consistently pumping, just trying to get enough milk where I could keep some in the fridge and give her milk. Mind you, I'm stressed out. We had just moved 600 miles from home. My child is in the hospital, and I don't know what to expect or what to do or anything. So I just kept pumping, and I kept waking up, and I kept pumping. And they wanted me to feed her every 3 hours, whatever she would eat. So I just kept doing that. And so that was on October 5th. And October 6th, day after, they still had me just feeding her. Just keep feeding her, we're gonna monitor. Okay, so they had speech come in and watch her drink a bottle, and they watched me breastfeed her to make sure basically that there was nothing wrong with the way that she was eating that was preventing her from gaining weight. Mason eats like a champ. There's no problem there. I knew there was no problem there, but we got to eliminate our options. That's fine. So they did that, and then the 7th rolls along, and we're 2 days into our hospital stay, and I got mad. They had not mentioned any form of imaging. They didn't mention any form of blood work, diagnostics, nothing. They said, we're just gonna keep feeding her and watching her. And my mama bear came out. I said, I'm going to feed my child no matter what you tell me to do. She's going to get fed every 3 hours because that's when she wants to be fed. It's when she wakes up, we feed her. I said, you need to be doing something more to figure out what's going on with her. Well, there's not really. And I said, no, we need to do something. We need to figure something out. So they had kind of mentioned to me, they're like, well, do you think we should try formula? Would you be willing to try formula? Whatever. And at that point, I don't want to say that I was unwilling to try formula, because I was not unwilling, but I didn't think that that was going to solve our issues. Mind you, she was still spitting out this whole time, of course. She'll never not do that. So, I told them, I said, I'm open to it, but I just don't think that that's going to fix our problems right now. I would like to figure out what's going on before we just introduce formula. Okay, so we waited. And the next day, that day they did some x-rays and some blood work. I think that they only did that to shut me up because they knew that I was mad. So they did those, and they were like, well, we don't really have any definitive answers for you. And they mentioned one of the student doctors actually came in and he said, you know, have you ever heard of the cow's milk protein intolerance? And I said, yes, I have heard of that. And he said, do you think maybe that could be it? And I said, well, I'm not sure. She doesn't have like a rash. She's never had any blood in her stool. The only symptom of that allergy that she has is that she spits up. That's the only symptom. And so in my head, I said, I don't think that's what it is. So they did, you know, their shut me up testing basically. And it all came back normal. And so the next day, in the morning, we put her on the scale and she had lost weight. And I was pissed. I was just so upset. I felt like we were failing her, that we were, you know, kept feeding her and nothing was happening. And they weren't doing any tests. They weren't doing anything. And so I looked at the nurse after she weighed Mason and I said, you need to get a doctor in here. She was like, okay. So she left and the doctor came in. It was a student. And she said, oh, good morning. What's going on? And I said, well, we have made no progress. We have been here for 3 days. You have not evaluated a single thing other than some normal blood work. And we have no answers, and my child is losing weight. I said, when you get together with your doctors this morning, you guys need to come in here first. This is not acceptable. And she was like, well, I need to talk to my supervisor. And I said, that's fine. You can talk to your supervisor. I'll talk to your supervisor if you'd like, you know, whatever. Let them know that I'm not happy. So about an hour later, all of the doctors come in the room and I looked at them. There was about 5 of them in there. And I believe Tyler was not with me at this point because Tyler was not able to stay at the hospital because we have the dog and they only allow one parent to stay overnight, which is fine. He needed to be home here with the dog anyways. So it was just me there at that point. And I told them, I said, you guys need to figure something out. I said, if you want to start formula with her, then we need to do that right now. If you want to do some more images, we need to do those this morning. Whatever you think you're going to do today, we need to get done now. And the doctor looked at me and he was like, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to figure out what's going on with my baby. That's my ultimate goal. Shouldn't have to explain that to you, but okay. So ultimately, there were a couple other options on the table. Ultimately, we decided that we were going to start formula. So they put her on a hydrolyzed formula, which means that it still had the cow's milk protein in it, but it was broken down. So we gave her that. We fed her that all day, that first day, and into the second day. And the second day, she had gained 3 ounces. So that morning, the doctor comes in the room. He looks at me. He says, well, I think she's doing great. She can go home. And to me, I was like, okay, cool. Like, great. So we went home. 4 days in the hospital we went home. So that was on Friday. So we got home, we kept her on that formula, into the next week. And then, the following Friday, Tyler called me in the morning and told me that his mom had passed away. So we had to get in our car. We packed everything up, packed the baby up, and we went to Pennsylvania because that's where his mom and his stepdad lived. And we got to Pennsylvania. We were there for 10 days. We were keeping her on this formula, but she was still upset a lot. She was crying all the time. She was spitting up everything. I was on the phone every day with our pediatrician's office. He was giving me ideas. We were going back and forth. Ultimately, we kind of just picked a different formula and put her on that, an elemental formula. And so we were there for 10 days, like I said. And after his mom's funeral, we came back home. And that night that we got home, because Mason had a doctor's appointment the next morning. So that night we got home, I put her on the scale that we have here at the house. And it had not changed. We were gone for 10 days. And it had not changed from the day that she left the hospital, which was 2 weeks at that point. So I panicked. I packed bags. I unpacked bags from being in Pennsylvania and repacked bags because I knew that we would be going back to the hospital. So in the morning, we got up, we got ready. I put all the bags in the car. We went to see our lovely doctor, who we love. And I told him, I said, I already know that you're going to send us back to the hospital. And I would prefer it if you did, because something is wrong with my child. And he looked at her weight. He looked at me. He looked at Mason. She was screaming her head off. And he was like, I agree. And so he made his calls and we went to the hospital. So I did not know at that point, obviously, how long we would be there, what would happen, what was gonna go on. We just went. So we got back to the hospital. The nurses were, of course, incredible. Very clear once we got there that day that they were going to be starting testing right away. So day one of her being back at the hospital, they ran blood work. They placed an IV catheter in her arm and they ran a stool sample. They assured me that this was going to be like a more in-depth stool sample. And I was like, okay, great. So we did that. And then the next day, they didn't really do anything at all. The day after that, on the 28th, they did an upper GI barium study, which is where Mason had to drink barium with her bottle. And they took a series of x-rays basically to see that it was going in the way it was supposed to and going where it needed to her stomach and her intestines, and that everything was traveling the way it needed to. That test didn't give us any answers because everything looked great. So the day after that, they didn't really do anything at all. On the 30th of October, that was a hard day. So, we were told, and I've been told, and I knew that Mason needed to see a GI specialist. I knew that she needed to because I knew that was who was going to give us the answers that we needed. So on the 30th, we finally got seen by the GI doctor after days of me just short of demanding that we were going to see a GI doctor and that they were going to get one in her room and they were going to look at her and they were going to be able to at least lead us in the right direction. Okay, you know, we'll do these tests or whatever. So the doctor came in the room. It was actually a Saturday, and he kind of looked at Mason and he said, I don't know that there's anything I can do for her. And I got pissed. I said, what do you mean that there's nothing you can do for my child? You are literally the specialist that we have been waiting to see. You are our best hope, and you're not willing to do anything. He said, well, I had you try thickened formula and you weren't willing to do that. We had tried putting cereal in her formula the night before that, and it was cement thick. It gave her the worst bellyache she has ever had. She screamed the entire night. She did not sleep, and she threw it up still. I was not willing to continue giving her that. If that makes me a bad mom, then I'm going to be a bad mom. I wasn't doing it. I made it very clear that even if that was what worked for her, that was not our solution, because something is wrong if your child needs to drink liquid cement to be able to gain weight. That's just my opinion. I'm going to leave it at that. So he basically, because I wasn't willing to continue doing what he wanted me to do, he was not willing to help my child. And so he left the room and he was like, well, she's just going to have to grow out of it. Baby spit up. And I looked at this man and I said, if one more person comes in this room and tells me that it is normal for babies to spit up, I'm going to lose my shit. I know that it's normal, but I know that the extent of my baby spitting up so much to where she needs to be hospitalized is not normal. You cannot tell me that that's normal. That's not. So he wasn't willing to do a single thing more than that for Mason. And the minute that he left the room, I also left the room and I found our nurse and I said, look, that man should not be working in pediatrics. He should not be working with concerned parents because he doesn't know how to handle it. And he is an asshole. And she said, we have had that complaint before. And I looked at her and I said, do not ever send that man back to my child's room. She will not be under his care. And I need you to get another GI doctor to her room. And the nurse looked at me and she said, yeah, absolutely. And so that Monday, we had a different doctor in Mason's room. And that is actually her current GI doctor, and we love and adore her so much. There is something that I skipped while I was explaining that to you. So after Dr. Asshole left, the team of doctors came in and the TPT tube. So what that is a transpyloric tube. It goes from her nose past her stomach to her intestines. So they placed that, and that was very hard on both Tyler and I. Mason took it like a champ because she's great, but it was very hard for us to adjust to looking at our daughter and just seeing the struggle that she was going through. Ultimately, the tube was a great idea. I made it very clear that we weren't going to, and this was after talking to Tyler, of course, he's on board with, everything, that we were not going to use the tube as a long-term solution. And they were like, no, we're not. This is just to clarify that she can gain weight, that she's capable of it. So the first night with the tube, she did lose a little bit of weight. That's because she had to wait before we could start the feedings. They have to place the tube, and then they have to do an x-ray to make sure that it's in the right place. So she went about 6 hours without eating, and so that obviously took a toll on her. And then the next day she continued with her tube feedings, and that was the Neocate formula in her tube, and she finally gained a little bit of weight. So that was a relief, that was happening. And then on the 3rd of November, they did a gastric emptying study. That was a 2-hour test. We went down to radiology, and they gave her, I don't know, the lady kept calling it radioactive liquid. It was in a metal bottle that she had to mix up and put in Mason's bottle, and she kept calling it the radioactive material. And it made me really uncomfortable, but we had to do whatever we had to do. So we sat in that room for 2 hours. They did a series of images to basically make sure that her stomach was emptying the way that it was supposed to once they were getting it down. She was getting it down. So that test came back. It was normal. Then on the 4th of November, so at this point we kind of just gave her body a little bit of time to rest with the tube, so that basically her stomach could rest. We were giving her esophagus and all of that time to rest because she had been spitting up her entire life. She did not spit up with the TPT tube. So that told us that the problem was above her intestines. So everything with that, that went well. And so then on the 4th, Mason pulled her tube. Pulled it right out of her nose. She was actually with Tyler at the time, and not that I'm blaming Tyler at all, because it wasn't his fault. But he said that she literally just was flailing her arms and just ripped it out. And they did make it very clear when they placed it that she would rip it out at some point or another. So we knew it was coming. It was really hard on Tyler that happened while he was with her, because I'm sure he probably felt like it was his fault, but it wasn't. So then they replaced the tube that night. And then on the 5th, they did some more intense stool testing and some more blood work. That stool testing actually because I had been fighting the whole time for them. I wanted them to do a test of some sort for the cow's milk protein intolerance. And they kept telling me, there's no test for that. There's no test for that. But I know people that have had their children tested for it. So I kept fighting it and kept fighting it and kept fighting it. And they were like, okay, we're going to do a malnutrition study for her stool. And that will tell us if she has that intolerance. So there was one level of her stool, and this was several days later that we even got it back, but that was incredibly high. And I don't remember what that was called, but they informed me that it probably is related to a severe allergy. And at this point, she was already on the Neocate formula, and we knew that it was working great for her, so we just didn't change anything. And they had also introduced at this point, because it's very clear that Mason has also severe reflux. So they had introduced as well, she was on Pepcid, which she's always been on for her reflux, as well as Prilosec. Actually, when she was at the hospital, it was Prevacid. She was on Prevacid. So they were giving her that every day. I did make a notice that she seemed to do better with those when it was spaced out rather than one dose throughout the day. So we started giving her 2 doses. And then the GI doctor also wanted to start her on one called erythromycin. And that is a stomach emptying medication. It's actually naturally intended for an antibiotic, but they use it also as a stomach emptying medication. So what that means is it was just pushing everything through her system even faster so that she was able to keep it down long enough to digest it. We have since taken her off the erythromycin, but she is still on the famotidine, which is Pepcid, as well as the Prilosec that we give to her in packets. So that happened that day. And then that same day, they did a barium enema, which is where they did the barium that they had done this way, but they did it the other way, basically to make sure that nothing was blocked with the exit, to make sure that, you know, there wasn't like some reason to where she was throwing everything up because she couldn't get it out the other way, which she had been having bowel movements, and I knew that everything was fine, but that's okay. We did that. That was normal as well. So on the 9th, 2 days later, they were finally happy enough with her weight gain and she was 10 pounds at this point. 10 pounds was just the biggest accomplishment we could have had. We all of the nurses, Tyler, we all celebrated once she was 10 pounds. So we moved the tube from her intestines up to her stomach, kind of just trying to get an idea of if she could continue to gain weight. She did. She continued to gain weight. So at that point, we were able to discuss the reintroduction of the bottle. So she had the G-tube for 1 day, and the very next day, on the 10th, we started giving her bottles by mouth, and she did great. She had to meet with GI, and she had to meet with speech. She met with OT multiple times. We were trying to just figure out, what the best way was to position her to give her these bottles and how much we should be giving her. And, at that point we were doing fortified calories. So we had to do more scoops per ounce of water, just trying to pack on those pounds on this kid. And so we were doing that and kept doing that. And she kept, progressing and gaining. The Neocate formula you can't buy in stores, so I had to get that set up for us to be able to get it delivered to our house, and if we were going to get it covered through insurance, and it was a whole hassle. Meanwhile, we're just continuing to feed her, give her her meds, monitor, and she was doing great at this point. And I kept telling them, they were like, she could probably go home here soon. And I just kept telling them because I was so scared, because I felt like we left too early the first time, that I didn't want to make that mistake again. So I just kept telling them, I'm not leaving until we're sure. I'm not leaving until we're sure. And they were like, okay, but she can go. So finally on the 17th, we got discharged from the hospital. Mason and I made it home to surprise Tyler when he got home from work that day. I kept telling him that we were going to get discharged the next day. So we got home, and it was a big adjustment because I had to adjust to being here in South Carolina on my own. Not on my own. I have Tyler and everything, but he does work. But with her and all of her new medications and her new formula and just getting everything, set and ready for her. And I was on the phone back and forth with the insurance company as well as the distributor for her formula. And they actually have a really great program called the Nutrition Navigator that helps you to go through the whole process. The first time that I submitted it for insurance for Mason, they denied it, but I knew that it was something they were going to cover because I knew that our policy covered it. So I fought that, and the second time they approved it. And so now her very expensive, very, very expensive formula is covered through insurance. And I was also had to put up a fight for her medications. Her Prilosec is given in packets. Our CVS here in town doesn't typically carry it because nobody uses it because it is so expensive. So I have to special order that for her every month, but our insurance does cover it. So we only pay $15 a month for those packets. And then we pay about $7 a month for her Pepcid. And our insurance so far has completely covered the formula, and it has been such a blessing. So yeah, we are very lucky that Tyler has a very good job. He has very good insurance. He does a great job at providing for us. And he was so great and so supportive the whole time that Mason was in the hospital. We're just so very lucky to have him, and we love him so much. Not me getting emotional talking about how great my husband is, but yeah, so she finally got to come home, and she's doing really well right now. She's finally 13 pounds, and she really is the happiest baby, and we are just so thrilled to have her in our lives and in our home. Tyler and I have adjusted really well with each other, and because he was used to living here in the house without me and Mason, and he just picked up with us here, and he's done great. So yeah, that is Mason's story. She does continue to follow up with her GI doctor. We actually just saw her this week, and she said that Mason does not have to see her for 3 more months, which is huge because we have been doing monthly weights. So she also gave us the okay to start baby food. We've started a couple things here. She had some carrots. She likes those. She does not like green beans, but Tyler says that's because he doesn't like them and they're gross, but whatever. So I think we're gonna probably try some butternut squash next. And yeah, we'll just keep watching her weight. We're always gonna watch her weight. But she's thriving. She's doing great. She is just laughing at everything, and she's so happy, and she just talks all the time, and it's just the greatest thing. She was so unhappy for so long, and we just didn't know what we were gonna do or what we could do or what we were doing wrong. And so it's just such a relief to look at her now and just see her so happy. So yeah, that's about it for her first 5 months of life. We can't wait to see, you know, what happens from here. Only good news. So thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Boo! 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 What? What are you talking about? Boo!